I'm Shirley. I'm a creative. I'm also a plant collector, and I founded Choosy, a social app for collectors like me. I've always been a person with a lot of ideas, and so, my creativity was always that outlet for making my ideas real. So during the pandemic, a lot of my creative works and creative assignments just stopped coming in, and there was a period of time where I ran out of creative inspiration. So right before COVID, I was freelancing at two studios, West Elm and Uncommon Goods. It's like sometimes I begin a sentence and then I completely lose my train of thought like a third of the way in. This happens all the time. I had been photographing at a couple of these photography studios in Brooklyn, and they were focused on like home decor. And so one thing that we would do would be shop for plants to decorate each scene with. And so it was for my job that I was styling all of these photo shoots with amazing plants. And I started bringing them home when we were done with set. And then once I got like 5 plants, my brain just wanted to get 10 plants. Then I started on the weekend just looking at different plants and learning everything I could about plants. I had always known I was a little bit neurodivergent. That's why, getting into photography, environmental portraits, conceptual, like still lives, it was this very like meticulous task. So not only would I look for like the plant that was the best plant for the scene, I would look for the most beautiful plant. I would look for the color of the plant matching the color of the subject or the scenery. And so that was always like, it always felt like I was on a treasure hunt. And even after I stopped working on so many photo sets during the pandemic, I still had this urge to keep going on that treasure hunt. It was almost like this routine where at this point I had already known like the 5 different best plant stores in Brooklyn. And so it like broke my routine when I had to stay, home when all of the productions stopped happening as frequently. But I just kept on collecting those plants. And it became my obsession in isolation, right? I had started, not having work to be my primary focus. And now I was exploring different hobbies, the things that I liked to do. I couldn't make the sourdough stuff work. So, the plants really gave me a lot of satisfaction because not only do I, bring them home, but then I have this new challenge of also nurturing them. And the more I got into plant collecting, the more I wanted to learn more about plants, to know everything about them. I started collecting like plants with albinism. And since they don't have a lot of chlorophyll, it's like a really big flex for plant collectors to be able to not only like have them and keep them, or a lot of them, but also like know how to take care of them really well. So I have a computer science degree that I actually, after I graduated, I pivoted away from computer science to go into the creative industry. I thought that was the better, the more satisfying outlet for me personally, just because I had all of these ideas, and I really liked to see my imagined ideas come to life. But I came up with the idea for the app because I wanted to learn from collectors. I wanted more planty friends. I wanted to buy plants, but I wanted to stop buying them from, you know, when I was buying plants, I always felt better about supporting my peers, my community. And the best part of buying plants was actually just nerding out about our collections along the way. So I started Choosy to meet more plant collectors. But once I started collecting plants, I also started collecting 90s Asian comics like Mashimaro and Astro Boy. I also started collecting Line Friends merchandise. I also started collecting things named Shirley. So, like back in the day, like these retro brands would start would start naming their stuff after women's names, and since I had a really old women's name, this is like the Stout Shirley bag. This is like the Hamilton Shirley pocket watch. Once I had one collection, I started so many collections because I was just getting inspired and starting to collect the things that like were satisfying to me. And yeah, I thought it was so fun, and you know, it would be nice to find people to do that together with. So that communal feeling of finding the same obsessives, the same, you know, nerds who are the same sorts of nerds that you are. That's the thing. I could find things everywhere. It was the people that I really wanted to find. So that's why I started Choosy. I have this trait where I can either say nothing or I can say everything. That's like two modes. Yeah. I think it's a really experience of being like third culture, because you have like these, it's almost like you have passed down, you know, feelings and like notions about mental health that are from, you know, your parents' generation, or like a different time, a different place, a completely different country that you're not like as familiar with, but you still have all of the feelings that are passed down, like, you know, it's almost like you feel the impact, whether that be stress or whether that be, you know, the pressure of having some things that you don't know how to talk about. You feel that, and that makes you different from the people here. That like that has always made me feel different from people here. Is like I have a lot of feelings about responsibility. I have a lot of feelings that, you know, stem from more like non-Western cultural. I have a lot of like feelings, and well, I feel like very impacted by a lot of non-Western attitudes, but also like I'm also a person that was raised here, so I am also feeling like pulled into like two different directions. And so when, you know, we're all trying to figure out like who to be, like what we care about, like what we feel, you know, what's right and wrong, like I've always had like a sense of confusion, or I've always felt a bit of frenetic energy as to it's like being raised by two cultures is like not physically, but like it's almost hard, because when you're developing the sense of who you are and who you want to be, there's almost like two like clusters of shoulds, right? And you never really feel like you belong in one space, and you never really feel like you belong in the other. That you fully subscribe to one experience but not the other. So it is interesting because some things that Americans find as normal, I challenge, and some things that my Chinese family feels is normal and right, I also challenge. And that is interesting, and there's an intersection with that, and for example, having ADHD too, because you try to look at things from so many different angles. It can be overwhelming, but also it has been this gift to be able to look at everything from every other angle. So seeing it as a gift is how I choose to see it. Is like, I think being third culture like adds to, for example, how overwhelming it can be, or I feel that, yeah, being third culture can add to this feeling of being pulled into different directions or having decision paralysis. But it's also this gift because you can really, really fast look at something from two different angles that you're deeply familiar with. And that makes me a lot more decisive. So social anxiety is I feel like social anxiety also really intersects with the experience of being a woman too. So I'm in the tech space now that I've founded my mobile app. I'm in the tech space, and you feel sometimes there are these double standards that reinforce social anxiety, right? That women are have the burden of more polish and more presentation when it comes to being a tech founder than men, who a lot of times can just get away with messy hair and a t-shirt. But then women, to be a woman who is taken seriously in a field like tech, or it could be finance, it could be business, social anxiety is being very aware of yourself, around others, or how other people perceive you. And being a woman and a woman of color, it makes me feel as if the stakes are higher. I feel as if our society even punishes women more for getting it wrong. Something like presentation, something like being on top of it at all times, or being perceived, right? Being perceived as confident, as competent is something that has grander stakes for women, because if people, the anxiety is that people won't believe in you. And statistically proven, when you look at how many businesses founded by women are funded, which is like in the single digits, comparatively, there's already this idea that it's probable. It's not just possible, it's probable that people won't believe in you when you walk in through the door. And so the anxiety of, what happens when I show up and show them who I am, right? Anyone can get social anxiety, but I do feel that women and women of color, if we're getting social anxiety, it's almost enhanced. We have to do more exercising to overcome that, because the stakes feel even greater. I love talking to users. I could talk to collectors all day. I had a friend whose dad collected, he loves Star Wars, and he had a whole case of just Jar Jar Binks figurines. And you know what? I think that not only is so one of the benefits, one of the beautiful things about introverted community that introverted, that like neurodivergent community is also when we connect, it almost feels like the social interactions feel more meaningful. So some of us were just made with more feelings, right? So gets anxious. If it's anxious, it feels like the degree of anxiety is more. The stakes are higher. But when we are connected, when we are understood, that level of connection, that level of interaction, just one-on-one, feels more impactful. It feels like everything will be okay forever. So the positives are also a multiplier. Right. I actually did an art project on this. Earlier I mentioned I was a creative, and I did a personal project. I published a photography series called Through Yellow Colored Glasses. And, it's about having a solid sense of self, but also existing in parallel with the stereotypes of you, because you're not sure which one is anyone else's impression of you. You're not sure which is the one that other people are seeing. Are they seeing your true self, or are also, you can't control if they have bias. That's out of your control. But, so it's that fear of, how much of this person's interaction with me is based on bias. In my art project it's me. It's actually a portrait, but they're all they're all me. It's a portrait of me with, layered on other me's. Very Cindy Sherman style, which is my favorite photographer. Very much so like Cindy Sherman. It's me as myself, but also existing next to the nerd. Somebody dressed up, myself dressed up as a nerd. A nerd, the child, the foreigner, good time girl. And these are all perceptions of the attributes of Asian American women. And so, just meeting someone for the first time, I sometimes, there is that worry that they question your leadership. There is that worry that, you're not being taken seriously as, on your own merits. So part of it's almost like I had to build my own strategies in order to alleviate this. It's almost like stereotypes are dangerous, but also the fear of being stereotyped, that threat of being stereotyped, is a burden uniquely on women and women of color primarily. And being a woman of color, you're not only dealing with the presence of it might be there, that bias in this interaction might be there. You're not only dealing with that as a woman of how people see you compared to a man that they were just interacting with, but also, based on your culture as well. So in the tech space, in the business space, right? One stereotype of Asian Americans is that we're not good leaders. And we see that one of the stereotypes around Asian Americans is that we're not good leaders, or we're smart followers, but that's the ceiling of where we are. And leading my own team, my own tech company, building a mobile app, doing these ambitious things, that is not a perception that I want ascribed to me. But these things are out of your control. What you can handle is, how much you worry about that. But the idea that some of us have the burden of handling that, as well as every other thing that we have to handle. That means like, I almost feel like being an entrepreneur is hard. Of course, if it was easy, everyone would do it. But I feel like as if not only being an entrepreneur is hard, but being a woman entrepreneur or a woman of color entrepreneur as well, this is an already hard journey, but we essentially can't just like run track. We have to be like Usain Bolt because of all of the additional obstacles, psychological obstacles, societal obstacles. Women have to work with the bias, especially women, like women in business, women in technology also have to handle the stereotype that women are fragile. And so it's almost like that feels as if, you know, you're raising the stakes for how your emotions project outward. And to always be on, to always feel as if you're always on, just to challenge that perception can be a challenge. Can be a really big challenge. And you know what? And I think that leads a lot of fellow women to lean away from seeming emotional, right? But that's the thing. It's like the emotions itself, there's nothing wrong with emotions itself, even at work, like building relationships and having positive interactions with people, understanding what other people want, what your users want, what your stakeholders want. It's really important. But I think that the fear that comes with, you know, bringing ourselves, with showing ourselves, that can stifle connections that are really positive. Yeah, that was just one thing. It's like we can't just be robots because we're afraid of showing our emotions, because we're punished for being fragile, for example. It could actually become blockers for us if we become too if we run the opposite direction and become too rigid as well and turn everything off. I've always prided myself on being quite high achieving. I've always been a very high achieving person, and you know, I really like, just personally, professionally, I really like to level up. So when I was in college, I was nominated for an industry award. And as a creative, this was a photography industry award. And one of the most prestigious ones. I remember being one of the 200 people nominated, right? Imagine like you were nominated to like Forbes 30 under 30, and there was a really good chance that you would get it. And then you didn't get it. And that's what happened to me. I was nominated for an award that I really wanted. And then I got the letter in the mail saying, you did not win. It was really hard. And I would say that was my lowest point, because, you know, we are always challenging ourselves, and we can almost see what we want, that like light at the tunnel, and we work hard for it. We can see the finish line, right? And it's disappointing. It's disappointing when you tried your best and you didn't get the trophy. I just remember being so, I remembered being really hard on myself. um, not wanting to go back into my studio, not wanting to pick up my camera, not wanting to tell other people what I was going through. It was almost like, well, I wasn't good enough. Let me just sit with that. And, I went almost into a loop, almost into a mental loop about this. And it happens really fast. It might just be a weekend, but the mental loop can happen really fast, where, one idea about yourself leads into 3 ideas, etc. And I ended up after talking to one of my mentors in the arts, I moved my yardstick from the award itself, something I couldn't control, to something that I could control. I started thinking about what I was curious enough to make more art about. I started a new personal project, picked up my camera again, and started a new one. I started going out and meeting other artists too, and started talking about their projects and even helping out with their projects, and then found that curiosity, that inspiration, and just picked it back up, and then went stronger. So I really needed to find my community at that time. And I really needed to find my community at that time, because if I was stuck in an infinite loop, I don't know that I would have returned to my art. But my brain, it iterates really fast, right? It starts on a journey. It goes, okay, you know what? I found a way past this. Let me get past it. And it's not only always my journey. It's one that is me, my support network around me. And then usually I get back up and it's even better the second time. And then I realized it wasn't that award that I needed. It was, seeing that finish line, like, what is it called? You accept not winning every battle, but you've won the war, is what they say. It's also not, every individual milestone, every individual, disappointment or obstacle or challenge, it's never one time. I realized that it wasn't just like one time and that was it, right? This is a cumulative journey, that we're on. We're on a journey of many sums of parts. I don't even know that many words in Chinese to describe emotions. Like, growing up speaking Chinese, like primarily at home, it's almost like I was intensely familiar with what my emotions were. And then I feel like sometimes this gap when I try to express them. Like the mental, there's a lot of mental sense. And then it's almost like stuck when I try to make the words real. So I actually did an arts. People tell me that I do this a lot, where I reference like a video or a meme or a movie when I'm trying to explain a concept or something abstract. I did this art project called Quarantine Care Package about how, there were not a lot of face-to-face interactions during the pandemic. And, you know, my parents were like, my family wasn't particularly as expressive about emotions, about like, you know, our inner states of being, or, you know, and I think that, and my art project Quarantine Care Package was about unspoken love languages. It was about like your mom or grandma leaving you a bag of groceries hanging on your door, like with like face masks and hand sanitizer and that, all of these things to make sure you're okay. Or cutting fruit, like, and putting it in a Tupperware, also leaving that in your care package. So it's almost like, not only did I grow up with different languages in general, but also different emotional languages. It's almost like I had to navigate the different measurements and yardsticks, right? If I was expecting a verbal form of affection, or like, it can be hard to have expectations if they just manifest differently. That's also what I mentioned about finding community with people that share different aspects of neurodivergence, because there are some things and some ways that we express in our own unique languages that maybe, you know, mainstream society doesn't express a lot. That makes me and it's not that those don't exist, they're just differently expressed. Did you see during the Super Bowl like Rihanna's bitch better have my money being translated into like American sign language, into sign language? Yeah. It's not that sign language isn't fun. Sign language is fun, but only they understand the fun. Or, you know, so, well, lack of messages about mental health, because again, the way my friends' parents talk about mental health, or the way that people in America talk about mental health, it was just different than how I thought I saw the feelings expressed. You know, I saw feelings expressed more towards actions. I feel as if I didn't grow up with like common sense. What I don't like the word common sense. I really don't like the word common sense, because it's almost like the way that a lot of people, the way that, you know, mental health strategies and self-care and like, you know, having a support network and all of these, like, you know, share your feelings, like all of the things that you're supposed to do, all of the solutions about how to handle like mental health challenges and obstacles. I feel as if I am still learning them, or I'm learning them also from people who grew up third culture, and maybe I felt unsupported in the sense the word support means different things, you know, culturally speaking, to different cultures. So I feel almost like I have felt like there have been gaps in the support that I wanted and the support that I had. And, you know, sometimes what's really good when you're at a stumble is having like affirming words, right? I mentioned when I had, you know, I was having trouble with losing out on that award. You know, I had talked to a mentor who had helped me reframe, you know, how I should feel about my next project, or like, you know, what was after the reward. My family always thought that words should help you solve a problem, and not necessarily like just the affirming aspect of it is almost like the affirming is what makes the difference in that time. But I think that the purpose of words might have been, you know, the purpose of words weren't necessarily like the same purpose that, you know, I was looking for. I was looking for different, like I was looking for affirmation, but maybe they were looking to solve a problem, help me solve my problem. And that may be support to them, but it may not have the same, come in the same form as I wanted myself. The happiest memory that I have is painting cherry blossoms with my grandfather in Beijing. And it sticks out to me because, you know, it was really the most low stakes moment that I've ever been in. Serene, right? Pink leaves, just like a watercolor brush. You had just been riding bikes with your grandfather, and eating popsicles on a really nice day in the spring. I remember it visually because literally it's a beautiful sight in my memory. But also I remember the feeling of it, feeling creative, feeling creative, just feeling at peace, feeling as if, you know, every possibility, you're a kid, right? So every possibility was in front of you, and you worried about nothing. You feared nothing, and you were just playing with everything. That was the most beautiful. That I constantly go back to that as my most beautiful memory. It's also the scarcity of that moment, right? I had grown up like living in America. I came to America in 1998. Got my citizenship in 2007. But my grandparents would come like once every year, but then for most of the year they would go back and go live in China. And like I mentioned, like my grandmother, like her sewing my name and stuff like that, the like painting with my grandpa like left something permanent, which was the art, right? I can see the art, I can remember what it looks like, and I can remember everything around it. He did photography as well and collected stamps. So I have really visual memory. So I would say I connect a lot of feelings to sights. It's almost like there's such a tangible evidence that memory, there's tangible evidence of that memory, and the object has a lifetime. It's not hoarding, it's not hoarding. It's not hoarding because it's really intentional. Each item is really intentional. I am rooted in relationships because they contain feelings, you know? Relationships have feelings and memories, and I really see relationships being the foundation of a lot of things. So feelings, memories, experiences, and it's all cumulative. I never lose my memories of a relationship. These things last for a lifetime, even beyond, like, relationships don't have an expiry date. Good or bad, they live with me. And every time I see something named Shirley, I'm going to think about my grandma, like sewing the things, sewing my name into things, you know? I wanted to say, like, I feel like I have things to say to myself, but earlier, or people like me, or women like me, but earlier. So what I would say for women like me is to trust yourself and your abilities and your skills, right? Always trust yourself, your abilities, and your skills. Secondly, so number one was trust yourself. The second one is surround yourself. You know, surround yourself with the people and things that uplift you. It's almost like don't forget to create the conditions in which you would thrive. My plants have a beautiful, controlled environment. They are so happy. And I have definitely put an effort to make them happy. So I put an effort to make myself happy. It doesn't happen all the time. We have so much power. You know, we can control like how we live and the people we surround ourselves with, and you know, how we talk to ourselves. So remember your power. Yeah. Like how I've solidified my own sense of motivation is for my peers, for my community, for, you know, everybody who's helped me along the way. Like, it helps to have something bigger than yourself that motivates you. I want to meet more Shirleys.
You should start like a group.
Yeah. Well, not like literally people with like the name Shirley, but people who have had the similar experiences or similar feelings and thoughts, or yeah.
And connect with other collectors.
Exactly.
People that find things that they love and they would just go for it.
Exactly.